You've got a friend in me. When the road looks rough ahead and you're miles and miles from your nice warm bed, you just remember what your old pal.
It's wholesome and sweetly sentimental, with a sing-along tagline and a sprightly, impeccable arrangement. By the numbers, You've Got a Friend in Me is far and away Randy Newman's most popular song. The single went double platinum. Spotify shows over 300 million streams. Toy Story hit North American theaters on November 22, 1995. It dominated its opening weekend and went on to gross over $373 million worldwide. It was the year's second highest grossing film. Along with Randy Newman's score, critics praised its groundbreaking animation, sharp writing, and stellar voice performances, especially Tom Hanks and Tim Allen. It holds a 100% rating on Rotten Tomatoes and is widely regarded as one of the greatest and most influential animated films ever. The film earned 3 Academy Award nominations, including Best Original Screenplay, a first for animation, and Best Original Song, and Best Original Score. For its revolutionary impact, Toy Story received a Special Achievement Academy Award. 30 years on, that impact is still felt. As the first fully computer-animated feature, Toy Story reshaped the film industry. Hell, it created a whole new film industry, Pixar animation. At their first meeting, Randy asked Toy Story director John Lasseter, give me one word that sums up the emotion or feeling he wanted to convey. Lasseter's reply, friendship. A few weeks later, on March 23, 1993, Randy sat down at the piano and presented You've Got a Friend in Me to John Lasseter. Lasseter was thrilled. Perfection. 2 years later, Toy Story was almost ready for release. Randy got the chance to preview some completed scenes, including the opening sequence that featured his song. Afterwards, Randy Newman pulled out his wallet and gave it an affectionate pat. He said aloud, "This movie is going to be very nice to you."
You got trouble, and I got them too. There isn't anything I wouldn't do for you. If we stick together, see it through, 'cause you've got a friend in me. You got a friend in me.
This podcast is intended to be education and commentary. It will discuss adult themes and may use coarse language. Pantheon Podcasts presents Rock N Roll Archaeology with host Christian Swain. Music, culture, technology, and rock and roll. And now, on with the show.
Hello and welcome back to another R&RA Short. I'm Christian Swain and I guess I am the Rock N Roll Archaeologist. We hope you enjoyed last month's drop of a new Tall episode that we called Turn and Face the Strange. In January, saw a short episode that focused on the new Bob Dylan biopic, A Complete Unknown, the title of our episode and the film. Well, we are back in March. Hey, look at us getting you the fresh content you deserve in a timely monthly manner. And I bet you all old school rock and roll diggers will enjoy hearing this news. We intend to keep it up all year long. Every month, Jerry, Richard, and I are hoping to get at least some form of good music podcasting into your ears. And we're going to try and be ambitious in 2025. We're hoping for a tall, quote-unquote, show every quarter, surrounded by shorts on the monthly around it. And we are going to bring a little of my old interview show, Deeper Digs, back as well. Just to get meta for a moment, we're seeking professional alliances and mutual aid with other online creators. Creators who work to keep rock and roll not just alive, but thriving and highly relevant in today's world of music, culture, and technology. That's why we created Pantheon, which now boasts over 120 music-related shows. From the outset, the RNRA has been favored by educators and academics, and we are very proud of that. The main episodes are not just opinion shows or reviews. We're digging a little deeper. And that is why we love Rock's Back Pages. Highbrow, lowbrow, in between brows. They have all the brows. May the rock gods bless Barney Hoskins and the team over at rocksbackpages.com forevermore. This online archive of the best music journalism is our secret weapon. Check out rocksbackpages.com to find all the good stuff. Our website is rockandrollarchaeology.com. Links to our socials, podcast feeds, contact info, it's all there. If you love it and love us, well, thank you, and maybe throw us $1 or $2 a month via Patreon. Subscribers get each new episode ad-free. Hit the support link up top on our website, and you'll find all of that. There's also a TeePublic button to smash if you'd like some official RNRA swag. Okay, let's take a quick ad break, and we'll come right back with the setup. Since that first Toy Story movie came out 30 years ago, Randy Newman has gone on to compose comforting, sweetly nostalgic soundtracks for a whole slew of Pixar films multiple generations of American kids have grown up with and instantly recognize. His work on the Toy Story franchise, Cars, A Bug's Life, Monsters, Inc., and more. 9 Grammy nominations and 2 Grammy Awards just for his Pixar soundtracks. Now, maybe not quite a household name, but Randy Newman is most certainly a well-known, celebrated film composer, and deservedly so. And yet a lot of people don't really know his full body of work. Outside of his work on films, the only Randy Newman songs that have really stuck in the mainstream are Short People and I Love L.A., especially if you're from the town. Maybe you could throw in It's a Jungle Out There from the TV series Monk. Great song. Won an Emmy in 2004. Great show, too, by the way. Randy wrote plenty of hits for other artists. Mama Told Me Not to Come by Three Dog Night, hit number 1 in 1970. Joe Cocker superbly covered You Can Leave Your Hat On in 1986. But we're talking about songs where he's both the writer and the performer. So today we're going to dig into that body of work with a particular emphasis on some Randy Newman offerings from the 1970s. That's the era we're currently discussing in the main show, so it seems only fitting. This is some rich and fascinating territory. Here is a life in the arts that combines wholesome family sing-alongs with searing, brutal, highly literate adult satire. Razor-sharp parody that takes on America's deepest historic flaws: slavery, social injustice, colonial genocide. Randy doesn't spit out words. He's not preaching or shouting. It's sarcastic and droll, seems kind of laid back, so it sneaks up on you. When that subtext becomes clear, when that shock and recognition finally hits, it'll make you gasp, sit down suddenly, and say, "Holy shit, is that what he's really talking about?" So, if you were an engaged, informed rock music fan in Southern California during the 70s, 80s, 90s, and beyond, if you were that kind of music fan, then you read reviews and features by Robert Hilburn. Lots of them. After 35 years at the L.A. Times, Robert retired in 2004 and went to work writing biographies. Some really good biographies. Johnny Cash, The Life, came out in 2014, and Paul Simon, The Life, was published in 2018. We extensively cited both books in earlier episodes of Rock N Roll Archaeology. After the Simon bio came out, I interviewed Robert Hilburn for the Deeper Digs and Rock podcast. Okay, at the risk of sounding immodest, it was a really good episode. Robert graced us with a wide-ranging, super interesting conversation, and the audio's great too. We did that one after master recording in Hollywood. Links in the show notes, and just because we can, we'll repost it in the main feed. Robert Hilburn's A Few Words in Defense of Our Country, the biography of Randy Newman, was published just recently in October of 2024. It's an immersive and satisfying read, and we highly recommend it. A Few Words details the life and work of a master songwriter and composer who is also a master of biting, caustic satire. We've been wanting to talk about Randy Newman for a while now, and Robert Hilburn's book gave us the push we needed. So, let's get to it, friends. This is another Rock N Roll Archaeology short. A few words in praise of Randy Newman.
There's a jungle out there, disorder and confusion everywhere. No one seems to care. Well, I do. Hey, who's in charge here? There's a jungle out there, poison in the very air we breathe. You know what's in the water that you drink.
The unreliable narrator is a fascinating trick in storytelling, even if you're not familiar with the term. You're familiar with the technique. It's when the narrator, whether in a book, film, or song, can't be fully trusted. Maybe they're lying. Maybe they're delusional. Maybe they're just not very bright. Maybe their worldview is just warped. Maybe. We, as the audience, have to read between the lines and try to figure out what is and what isn't so. For an example, we'll use a book and a film from the early 70s, around the same time Randy Newman's performing career broke out. We're talking about A Clockwork Orange. The novel was written by Anthony Burgess, the film directed by the great Stanley Kubrick.
I'm singing in the rain, just singing in the rain. What a glorious feeling, I'm happy again. I'm laughing at clouds.
Alex, our protagonist, is the ultimate unreliable narrator. He tells his story with charisma and flair, like he's the hero of some grand adventure. But here's the thing. Alex is a violent sociopath. He delights in chaos. His perspective is so twisted that it forces us to question everything we're seeing. Are we supposed to hate Alex? Feel sorry for him? Should we laugh at or be sickened by his ultraviolence and depravity? Meanwhile, the uncertainties keep piling up. By the time the film forces Alex through its own brand of rehabilitation, we're left wondering, who are the real villains? That's the power of the unreliable narrator. It puts us in a shaky, unsettling space where we have to think for ourselves instead of just taking things at face value. In song, Randy Newman is the undisputed master of the unreliable narrator. We'll deconstruct a few examples from Randy's long career.
In America, you get food to eat. Won't have to run through the jungle and scuff up your feet. You just sing about Jesus and drink wine all day. It's great to be an American. Ain't no lion or tiger, ain't no mama snake.
First up, the title cut from Randy's third studio album, Sail Away. Released in the spring of 1972, this album is an absolute gem. We struggle for words to describe how much we love and appreciate it. For a Randy Newman album, well, it did well commercially. His best to that point in his career, about 300,000 units, enough for gold certification, cracked the top 40, albeit just barely. All of our favorite rock writers from that period, Hilburn, Christgau, Bangs, all of them were over the moon with their praise for Sail Away. Rolling Stone gave the album 5 stars and put it on their annual Best Of list. They even named Randy Newman Rock Star of the Year in 1972. Okay, quite an interesting choice, because this isn't a rock album made by a rock star. Our first impression of the album, Sail Away, was, and still is, timeless. This music could emerge from any time during the last century or so. It's informed and inspired by all the depth and richness of the American musical experience. The songs evoke Stephen Foster, George Gershwin, Aaron Copland, Ray Charles, and Fats Domino, the bluesmen, the jazzmen, and most charming touch of all, 1920s vamp and vaudeville. So that's our overall impression of the album. Now, let's talk about the title song. A few minutes back, when we talked about gasping out loud, once you recognize what's really going on, that's what the song Sail Away does. First off, it's a splendid composition, not even 3 minutes long. It's this lovely little musical vignette, something beautiful from an earlier, simpler time. On the surface. Now, if you're not familiar with Sail Away, we highly suggest, if you can, just pause this podcast right here, stream the song, and come right back. It won't take you too long at all. All right, what's Randy up to with this one? We'll start by looking at an American myth. We heard it growing up. We recognized it at the time for what it was. Bullshit. It's just preposterous. It's the Lost Cause myth, a false interpretation of the American Civil War that portrays the Confederacy as somehow heroic and downplays slavery as the root cause of the war. Part of the phony lost cause narrative is that slavery wasn't all that bad. Hey, we rescued them from the jungle, gave them food to eat, a place to stay. African American slaves were valuable assets, so they were treated with care and concern. It's basic economics, kids. In Texas, high school history books today still teach that there were kind and generous slave owners, and that many slaves were content with a life of forced servitude. If you say so, partner. Again, insanely dumb and wrong, preposterous, but this lost cause narrative has been around since Reconstruction. Millions of Americans still believe it, still buy into it. So, we don't know what Randy's process was exactly when he wrote Sail Away. According to Hilburn, it wasn't a song that just showed up one day. Randy worked on it over time and made a lot of revisions. We do know this lost cause nonsense was peeing around Randy's brain. Hey, come on, slavery wasn't all that bad. So, Randy created his most unreliable narrator yet, a smooth-talking salesman. On the surface, he's given a cheerful pitch about coming to America. But then you realize, with growing unease, that it's being sung from the perspective of a slave trader. It sounds enticing, but there's horror underneath. He's lulling his marks into a false sense of complacency before he captures and enslaves them. It wasn't a big hit. It could never be a big hit. But Sail Away is exactly the kind of song that, at least to us, makes Randy Newman so damn interesting. No polemics, no preaching. Instead of villainizing the slave trader, he adopts their voice. He lets their own honeyed words expose the moral rot that lies just beneath. Uncomfortable, but also brilliant and beautiful. Peak satire. All right, next song. Here goes.
We got no neck or men from Texas, good old boys from Tennessee, college men from LSU. When in dumb, come out dumb too. Hustling around Atlanta in their alligator shoes.
In 1974, Randy Newman kicked off his fourth studio album, Good Old Boys, with a song that still burns like a blowtorch, Rednecks. Randy steps into the voice of his unreliable narrator, who, drops the N-word, drops it a bunch of times, but Rednecks isn't really about this one guy's bigotry. It's about how that bigotry is woven into the fabric of an entire nation, north and south, east and west, then and now. The song unfolds as a bluesy country rock groove that just lopes along. The chorus features silky smooth backing vocals from the Eagles, which honestly makes the whole thing even more unsettling. It's a brutal parody, a harsh spotlight on Jim Crow racism. Even now, 50 years later, it still makes us flinch. Oh, I'm sure you all know this one. In 1977, Randy Newman scored the biggest hit single of his career to that point. Short People was an oddly successful track that climbed all the way to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100. The song stirred up controversy, got talked about a lot. Some people didn't get that the over-the-top insults were pure satire. At the time, a certain brand of earnest liberal seemed to misinterpret the song in the opposite direction. Not so fast there, Sparky. We'll explain. Pay attention to this next part. Here's the bridge section, once again, sung sweetly by the Eagles, and once again, the effect is creepy and hilarious at the same time.
Short people are just the same as you and I.
Fools such as I,
All men are brothers until the day they die.
it's a wonderful world. Short people got nobody.
Newman isn't just mocking his bigoted narrator. He uses the bridge section of the song to poke fun at the self-congratulating liberal, the kind who assumes they're in on the joke. With the reply line, "A fool such as I," our unreliable narrator briefly agrees with the Eagles' humane and hopeful message. And he concludes that it's a wonderful world. Only to double down and come right back with even worse prejudice.
They got little voices going beep, beep, beep. They got grubby little fingers, dirty little minds. They're gonna get you every time. Well, I don't want no short people.
It's a satirical double whammy. The loathsome, unreliable narrator gets roasted, but Randy reserves a little caustic scorn for those naive folks who think platitudes about brotherhood are enough to erase bigotry. All right, let's drop the big one now.
No one likes us, I don't know why. We may not be perfect, but heaven knows we try. But all around, even our old friends put us down. Let's drop the big one and see what happens. We give them money, but are they grateful?
All right, Political Science, yet another classic off the Sail Away album, opens up with yet another of Randy's unreliable narrators. This particular narrator is petty and angry, ticking off a list of grievances. Like all unreliable narrators, he's incapable of self-reflection, which might lead him to understand why no one likes us. But instead of reflecting, he just goes straight to a nihilistic revenge fantasy. Let's drop the big one and see what happens. Then he weaves away in the middle to wax nonsensical about saving Australia. Don't want to hurt no kangaroos. After a couple of non sequiturs, amusement parks, and surfing too, our unreliable narrator weaves us back to his fantasies of grievance and retribution. He trots out a tired, many times broken promise of renewed greatness for America once that revenge is complete. How peaceful it'll be. We'll set everybody free. Reminds us, more than a little, of those rally speeches by the unreliable narrator from Mar-a-Lago.
They all hate us anyhow, so let's drop the big one now. Let's drop the big one now.
Over the years, Randy Newman has shown his uncanny ability to write songs that, while not ripped straight from the headlines, feel eerily in tune with the national mood, sometimes out in front of it. He puts words and music to those uncomfortable thoughts hanging in the air, the things nobody quite said out loud yet. His music can be funny, warm, and nostalgic. It can also be cutting, cynical, and unflinchingly honest. As we said earlier today, the duality kind of knocks you back on your heels. The sweet and sentimental soundtracks for all those wholesome family movies come from the same songwriter who created Political Science, Rednecks, and Sail Away. One moment, he's making you cry happy tears with You Got a Friend in Me. Next, he's using a cheerful melody to expose racism, imperialism, and political decay. That's his magic trick. He doesn't just comment directly on America. He holds up a mirror, often before we even realize what we're looking at.
I'd like to say a few words in defense of our country.
And that brings us to the song A Few Words in Defense of Our Country off the Harps and Angels album. When it came out in 2007, it was a critique of Bush-era politics, but it might resonate even more today. A Few Words lays out the decline of an empire, the rise of fear as patriotism, the erosion of credibility on the world stage. Sound familiar? It's like Randy Newman saw the writing on the wall, and instead of warning us outright, he does what he always does, wraps it in a deceptively simple song, and leaves us to sit with it.
This empire's in you, like all the rest. Like the Spanish Armada, drift on the sea. We drift in the land of the brave, the home of the free. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye.
I'm Christian Swain, and this has been Rock N Roll Archaeology on Pantheon Media. Thanks for listening. And friends, if you're not hopeless, then you're not helpless. Find a way to stay hopeful. And remember, you've got a friend in me. Well, us. Keep up the rockin', and we'll see you next time.
Rock N Roll Archaeology is written by Richard Evans and Christian Swain. Produced and hosted by Christian Swain. All sound design and incidental music by Jerry Danielson at Busy Signal Studios. Find all of our shows, notes, and links at pantheonpodcast.com. All songs can be found for purchase or streaming wherever you get your great music. Please pick up these amazing tracks. Contact us on social at Pantheon Podcasts on Facebook and Instagram. Tweet us at Pantheon Pods.